all the other elements of this film, whether it's the visuals of the dinosaurs, the music, the cinematography, the locations, all of that works so well to just help create this world, help create the story, give more depth to what we're seeing. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the great things about the story and the characters is that they make you feel like you are there. Now, they do a great job of that, but it's everything else. It's the little things that you don't usually pay attention to. It's the music, like I said. It's the cinematography. It's the effects. These are things that pull you in, and these are the things that make this movie feel real. So how do they stand up today? Well, we'll get into that. For the most part, things hold up pretty well. But you do have to remember at the same time that this movie was made a couple years ago. It was made probably over 20 years ago. I think it was in 92. So effects have come a long way since then. But overall, I think it still holds up quite well. First, let's talk about some of the cinematography. There are wide, sweeping shots, and you know the ones I'm talking about. They're there when we need to see this world, when we need to know what type of world we're entering. Probably the best one is that first view Grant gets of dinosaurs just off in the distance. And he says, they do move in herds. Like, that sweeping shot is just so good. And it really sets the tone. Another sweeping shot is when we come in and we see the island. It's on its own. It's away from everything. I would call this a sweeping shot when we see the helicopter landing. And that just gives us an idea of how grand this location is, how secluded it is. It's like you're on another planet almost. You're in another world. The sweeping shot of the gate opening when you get to see Jurassic Park for the first time, when you get to see that sign in the door. When you enter into the main lobby and you get an idea of what this place could look like. All these sweeping shots are there for a reason, and they work. They really help to create a broad overall view of this world. But when you have long sweeping shots, you also got close-up shots. And the close-ups for this movie really help to accentuate what the characters are thinking, or at least how they're feeling. And this would not work if it wasn't for the performances and how good they are. But some examples are just the idea that they give us with joy or terror of these characters, like Lex. When she sees the raptors in the shadow in the dining hall, the terror in her eyes, the way she just freezes and the camera just freezes. It's terrifying. To this day, that shot is terrifying, especially when it's on the big screen. You know there's a raptor back there. But just the way the camera moves from her going to eat Jello and then she's looking, and the close-up just creates so much tension there. Joy. When Grant realizes there are dinosaurs, it pulls in on his face and you just see like a big grin on his face, like what? He loses his mind. Not literally, and he's not going jumping, shouting all for this. You can see it in his mind. And he just doesn't know what to say. Except for that line, they do move in herds. It just shows how stunned he is. And these are moments you need those close-up shots. You need them to help give an idea or to help make the audience feel the same way the characters are feeling. The horror and the suspense scenes, whatever you want to call them, the camera moves just enough to keep you on the edge of your seat or the edge of your focus. And does a great job of being like, okay, is there something? No, there's not something. Just like the first time you're supposed to see the Tyrannosaurus Rex. You're like, camera's focused on the goat. It's like, okay, where's the dinosaur? Where's the dinosaur? You are like you feel like you're in the car, moving your head back and forth. Like you want to see off the screen what's on the other side. And that's all due to the suspense it creates. And then when everything goes down, and you just hear or feel the thump, 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 until you slowly move up and you just see this giant sized head of the T-Rex before it lets out its roar, which is great. Just looking at it, the way the camera's there, it just creates tension and horror. Like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And that's great. The horror with the raptors when they're in the kitchen, every little movement, every little angle of the camera helps create this idea of trapped, this idea of close quarters, not knowing what to do. Let's talk about now the score and the music. It's great. It's John Williams, though. John Williams always delivers when it comes to these scores. He has, no one can argue. I would like to see anybody argue with me on this. He has some of the, if not the most famous melodies, most famous scores when it comes to movies. I don't even need to name them, but I will. You've got things like the Star Wars themes, whether that's the Imperial March or Yoda's theme or Duel of the Fates. You've got the Raiders March from Indiana Jones. You've got all these things, Jaws. You've got all these movies that he scored, that the music is just fantastic. You start to hear it and you know what movie it's from. Jurassic Park's no different. I mean, who does not think of the gate opening when they hear the do 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 do? I'm not doing it justice. I'm not nearly doing it justice. But the music, again, adds to the fulfillment of the movie. It adds the wonderment of this idea that dinosaurs exist again. They walk among us. It just helps build so much in this world. And then there's the underlying score. The score that you don't always pay attention to. There's a concert they do in California where John Williams comes out, he directs some of his most famous pieces. I heard a story about a time where they did Last Crusade and they played it with John Williams doing his score, and then they played it without. And I heard there was a huge difference. And I can only imagine what Jurassic Park would be like without his score. It would not be the same. I mean, the music, the beating of the drums, whatever, when they create the tension, they add to it. It's because of the score, the sound effects, that you're feeling things the characters are feeling. There's not enough to really explain how good the music is. Because when it's doing its job, you don't realize it's there. Now I was listening for it. And I was paying attention. I was analyzing the film more this time around. So that's why I was picking up on things. The action moments. They have some great action scenes. Maybe nowhere near some of the action scenes that we see later on in like the Jurassic World end of this franchise. But it's got its own action moments that just help add to that feeling that you're there. The most noticeable one for me was that dino stampede, which I admit I couldn't help but, I was thinking about Lion King a little bit, thinking about the wildebeest stampede there and thinking, this was the original stampede. Well, one of the original stampedes, but nobody dies here. I couldn't help it. I like Disney, but yeah, that whole stampede scene makes you feel like you're there. While it is important to remember that this film was made back in 1992, I believe, and you remember that effects weren't great back then, and we've built on them since then, you still have to look at the effects today and try to look at it from both perspectives. I'm tongue-tied. I'm sorry. Perspectives. Overall, the effects are still great. The things I love the most definitely are the mechanical dinosaur aspects. I feel for the most part they still work. They still look great. Now, somebody, Rob, who you might have seen on my Dominion review, did bring up about the raptor eyes don't quite work. Some of the mechanic stuff still feels choppy. But honestly, I thought the mechanics worked great. I still believe that those are real dinosaurs. I can only imagine what it was like back when the movie first came out and to see it for the first time. Though I will say, the one part of the movie where I felt like the visuals did fail was actually that sweeping shot of getting to see the whole park for the first time. It's a great shot, don't get me wrong. But it still kind of looks like a matte painting to me. I thought about that this time. It's still good. It does what it needs to do. Effects were great. That was the best the effects had ever been, especially when it came to dinosaurs at that time. But looking at it from today's perspective, it kind of feels like a matte painting. And that's the worst part about the effects for me. I think everything else is just fantastic. Like I said, John Williams, he had a great score. Creates another theme that we will always remember. His music, like I said, adds so much to this movie. And it's one of the things that make this movie great. This movie has so many memorable lines. I've said so many of them throughout this review. It's got memorable moments, memorable scenes, memorable music, memorable dinosaurs, memorable chases. It's got so much stuff that you just can't help but remember. But, of course, one final thing, we need to talk about the locations. I don't know how many of these locations were real. I don't know how many of them were made in computer. I don't know how many of them were on a stage. I'm sure the center was on a stage. I'm sure part of the dinosaur track where the cars went, I'm sure that was staged. There's a lot of things, yes, you know that had to be a stage. But the location, flying to the island, descending into where the park is, all of that just made this location, made this world so grand. And it's one that people keep wanting to go back to. As a movie, I'd say Jurassic Park has withstood the test of time. Sure, there's some things that when you put it under a microscope may not work. Some of the visuals might not stand up as well. Some of the plot points you might think aren't really needed like I do. Some things might not be as obvious as they once were, or some things may be more obvious. But whatever the case is, Jurassic Park holds up. There's a reason this is one of the great movies of all time. There's a reason so many people love this movie. And let's be honest, there's a reason that none of the other dinosaur movies, none of the Jurassic Park films, none of the Jurassic World movies have touched this one or will ever be better than it, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people feel that way too. It just hit everything perfect with the story, the characters, the visuals, the music, everything. It told a great story, and it told a story that we will love for years to come. It feels like a timeless tale, no matter what we may think about the look of things. Regardless of our advances in technology, regardless of our advances in science, it is a movie that I truly believe will be timeless for many, many years to come, if not forever. But what do you think? What are your thoughts about Jurassic Park? Has it stood up? Do you still love it? Is it better than you remember? Is it worse than you remember? Have you not seen Jurassic Park? In that case, sorry if I spoiled things for you, but it's an over 20-year-old movie. when it comes to rankings, for me, this one's pretty easy. This movie's a mentor movie. It's up there. It's one of the best. Yes, it has a lot of talking. It might not be as action-packed as the later films, but it has enough of everything that it's just a great movie. And there is a reason why this, like I've said, is one of the best and greatest movies ever. So, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below to get all my future videos. But until our next retro review, remember, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.